I would now like to introduce our esteemed speakers for our final panel. Sharing his insights on the theme of brands as central organizing principle for business is Mr. Harish Bhat. Having joined the Tata Group in 1987 in the Tata Administrative Services, Mr. Bhat today is responsible for India's most valuable brand. He has also been a director on boards of several Tata companies such as Trent, Tata Starbucks, Tata Unistore, to name a few. During his stint of 3 decades with the Tata Group, Mr. Bhat has held several senior positions and has played a key role in the launch and nurturing of many iconic brands such as Titan, Fastrack, Tanishq, and Tata Tea. He has also played a role in the turnaround of the jewelry business and in the milestone acquisition of Tetley. Selected as the top voices of India in 2019 by LinkedIn, Mr. Bhat is also a prolific writer with various national newspapers such as the Hindu, Business Line, and Mint. He has 4 published books to his credit, including the newly launched Tata Stories, which he shares snippets on LinkedIn. I'm a very avid follower. I would indulge the audience members to take a look at it, which narrates 40 timeless tales from the Tata Group. His book is a sequel to the national bestseller Tata Log. Welcome, Mr. Bhat.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction and look forward to participating in the panel today. Thanks a lot.
Joining Mr. Bhat is Ms. Pervin, the iconic force behind CRY. She shared her career in advertising. She started her career in advertising while working with Lentus India for 3 years before moving to CRY in 1990. She worked with CRY in various capacities until she took over as the CEO from 1998 to 2004. Since then, she has been a consultant within the development sector, working with various NGOs. From 2010 to 12, she worked with Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai on a project led by Dr. Monica Sharma. All of us know her as the author and creator of Radical Transformation in Leadership, RTL. Since 2012, she has been conducting a weekly music session with senior citizens at the Holy Spirit Home in Bangalore. Their choir, called the Choir of Loaves and Fish, has performed 17 public concerts over 9 years, both in the home and venues near the home. Pervin serves as a trustee on the board of CRY, Dream a Dream, Pratham Books, Lighthouse Communities Foundation, and Citizens for Peace. Welcome, Pervin.
Thank you so much for having me.
And joining the conversation all the way from the Maldives is Dr. Abdulla Mausoom, Minister for Tourism, Maldives. Born in the island of Kela, Maldives, Dr. Mausoom started his tourism career in 1985 as the administrative officer at the Department of Tourism. Dr. Mausoom holds a doctorate degree in sustainable tourism development conferred by the School of Public Policy, University of Birmingham, United Kingdom. From February 2019 to August 2020, Minister Mausoom served in the Diplomatic Corps of Maldives. He was the High Commissioner of the Republic of Maldives to the Republic of Singapore, and the non-resident High Commissioner to New Zealand and designated non-resident High Commissioner to Australia. Minister Mausoom has worked as a tourism consultant for over 25 years and was involved in the development of the pivotal 3rd Tourism Master Plan of Maldives. He was the lead author of the Maldives Ministry of Tourism's publication, 35 Years of Tourism. Welcome, Mr. Mausoom.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And moderating the session for us is Ms. Ekta, CEO, EQUITOR Value Advisory. Ekta oversees the overall operations at EQUITOR. Previously, she has worked in banking operations and consulting, where she managed high expectations from clients across the globe. With a minute eye for detail and natural inclination towards method and order, she leads a team of highly motivated commandos. If she wasn't at EQUITOR, one might even see her as a classical singer performing on the stage. Welcome, Ekta.
Thank you.
I would now request Ekta to deliver it on the topic of brands as the central organizing principle for business with our panel members. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tarun. It is indeed a very big to be sharing the panel with you. To give all of you and our audience a context, let me give a brief idea about what the panel is all about. So we have usually seen and heard from our experiences that many organizations build strategies, create plans, structures, and processes, and then think about brand like an icing on the top. And therefore, like I mentioned in the first panel, it goes the marketing department to take care of it. But powerful brands make sure that they start from the brand, define the higher purpose, like Mr. Richard Reiki mentioned, and build outwards. So, this panel, having a representation from the three of you from very different but powerful brands, we want to hear about how important it is to define what the brand stands for and to put it at the center of everything that you do as an organization or even as a country. So let's start from you, Mr. Bhat. The Tata brand today is valued at $21 billion, right? It is perhaps the biggest global brand we have. All of us have heard so many stories about the Tatas around the area of compassion, conscience, or courage, including some that were mentioned in the previous panels, and the latest one being the Air India story. As a brand custodian of this 150 years old legacy, can you tell us with a couple of stories what the Tata brand stands for?
So Ekta, thank you. It's a pleasure and privilege to speak in this panel. I want to just begin by congratulating EQUITOR on 20 glorious years. I have had the opportunity to interact with RJT, Ramesh, during my stint in Titan, as well as very recently during my stint in Tata Sons as well. And I know the fascinating work that all of you do at EQUITOR. So firstly, heartiest congratulations. It's also a privilege to follow the fascinating discussion which was held with Mr. Bhaskar Bhat just now. Bhaskar was my boss in Titan for many years. And a lot of what I have learned in marketing in the brand space was actually learned from him. So, the Tata brand is a fascinating brand. You asked for a couple of stories. So let me narrate the stories first, and then let me talk about what the idea of the brand is. Okay. I want to go back to I'll come to some contemporary stories later, but let me go back to the very first story. How many of you know that the first industrial enterprise founded by the Tata Group was founded in the 1870s by our founder, Jamshedji Tata? It was called the Empress Mills in Nagpur. And it became a very profitable enterprise. Within a few years, it returned to its shareholders more than 20 times their capital within a few years. And he used the latest innovations, the ring spindle from the UK, which even the UK mills were not using. He's located the mill in Nagpur, which was the center of the cotton industry. He built a lot of depth of expertise on cotton and the category. And he made brilliant textiles. It was perhaps the most profitable mill in India at that time. But he did something else, which represents the ethos of the Tata brand. In 1887, he established a pension fund for workers, the first of its kind in the country. In 1895, he introduced accident compensation for the workers. In 1901, he introduced a provident fund scheme for his workers. And a few years later, by the 1920s, Empress Mills had creches for the children of the working women. This is more than 100 years back that I'm talking about. So many people asked, why is he spending so much money on employee welfare? Doesn't this wealth belong only to the shareholders? And I had the privilege recently of reading the only published speech of Jamshedji Tata, which he made in 1895. And look at what he says. People asked him, why do you do all this? And in the speech, he responds, and these are beautiful words. He says, we do not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic than other people. But we think we started on sound and straightforward business principles. Considering the interests of our shareholders our own, and the health and welfare of our employees and the community, the sure foundation of our prosperity. So look at what he says. He says the interests of our shareholders is certainly very important. They are like our own interests. But at the same time, the welfare of our employees and the community is at the center of what we would like to do. And what I'm delighted about is that philosophy that our founders set forth more than 130 years ago is what the Tata Group is living with even today. You heard Mr. Bhaskar Bhat speak about how Titan has created employment for people from rural Tamil Nadu, or the work that Tanishq is doing for karigars in the jewelry industry today. It's the same story of being dedicated to the community through the work that you're doing. So That's one story that I want to narrate of how the community has been and will always continue to be center stage for the Tata Group. The second is that the Tata Group has, I think, always looked at industries which are important to the nation and which the nation can be, will benefit from in the future and which the nation can be proud of. Right from Tata Steel, which was established because Jamshedji Tata wanted India to have its own steel and not import it. And I can talk about Tata Airlines, which is now Air India, which was founded because JRD Tata thought civil aviation was very critical for the development of the country, or the trucks business by Tata Motors in the 1950s, or for instance, the Tata Consultancy Services, India's first IT services company in the 1960s, or you take branded iodized salt in the 1980s, or you take Tanishq in the 1990s, or you come along the entire, or you take Tata Digital, which is setting up a new digital venture today to create a digital ecosystem across the country. So I think the Tata Group has been committed to the concept of nation building through its businesses. And that has also remained consistent through all these. So the story I want to narrate here is actually the story of Tata Indica. In the 1990s, Mr. Ratan Tata stood up and said, let's make India's first indigenous car where all the parts and the accessories are also made in India. Many naysayers said it cannot happen. And he actually asked industry to join him in creating this first indigenous car. But because of the naysayers, he said, if people are not willing to join, let me go ahead and do it in telco, in Tata Motors. And he went ahead. He actually got his engineers in the ERC in Tata Motors, Engineering Research Center in Tata Motors in Pune to design the Tata Indica along with IDEO of Turin. Then he got, local accessory and part makers established in the Pune area and the western belt of India to supply the car. He could not, at that time, Telco could not afford to buy a new car plant because it would cost billions of dollars. His engineers and Mr. Tata scoured the world around. They found a disused Nissan plant in Australia, bought it at 1/5 to 1/6 the price that a new car plant would cost, disassembled it brick by brick and brought it to Pune, where the Tata Indica plant was set up. And that, I've spoken to workers who created the first Tata Indica. They cry with joy even today when they think about it, because they have contributed to the building of India's first indigenous car. It went through some quality issues. Those were rectified. And by 2001, 2002, Tata Indica V2 was the fastest selling car in this country. And that is the organization that Bhaskar referred to earlier, which is shifting to renewables now, electric vehicles, where it's already the market leader. And a fascinating range from the Nexon to the Punch to everything else that you see in the Tata Motors portfolio. So these two examples, whether it is Empress Mills in the 1890s, or whether it's Tata Indica now, or all the other businesses I've talked about earlier, are examples of either doing well for the community or doing well for nation building. And of course, the Tata brand stands for excellence. I could not agree more with Bhaskar when he said that eventually the quality of products and services, the hygiene values that your consumer seeks from your product, if those do not exist, then a good brand and a trusted brand will not exist. So if you take community, if you take pioneering for the nation, and if you take this concept of business excellence, doing business right, providing all stakeholders the best value of products and services, those ideas of the Tata brand have remained unchanged for 150 years, which is why I think the brand continues to flourish. So thank you, Ekta, for asking that question. And sorry if this was a little bit of a long-winded answer.
I think these are stories we want to keep hearing, and we can keep hearing for the next of the session. Minister Mausoom, if I could ask you, I was reading somewhere that the Maldives brand has became the destination that we know today in the last 15 years, right? I remember RGT used to tell us that when you land in Maldives, you see one aircraft and 50 private jets. So from a fisherman island to a tropical hotspot, from no foreign investment to a place filled with private resorts and private jets today, how have you built this nation brand, and what does the brand stand for today?
Thank you very much, Ekta, and thank you very much, other panelists. I also wish to convey my appreciation congratulations to EQUITOR and of course Ramesh, Jude Thomas, Arjeti, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this interesting panel. I think you're right. We started very slow in 1972. Next year, we are celebrating 50 years golden year. And last year, Maldives won the world's leading destination award by World Travel Awards. And again, this year, we have won world's leading destination award. We wanted to be the leader. First, of course, when the luxury travel hit, Maldives was the ideal destination. Ideal in the sense, if you read a storybook or if you look at the postcards, say there are postcards that depicts holiday, tropical holiday, and Maldives have the perfect this one. And we had a theme destination, the brand tagline, "Sunny Side of Life," that is very much Latin oriented, fun, relaxation, enjoyment, everything. So that is there. And around 2005, we knew that traditional Maldives has to move away and to be at the edge of the product. We invited the international brands so that Maldives would become more popular. Though there was the time first, the standard charters were there, operated by giant tour operators who had the total vertical integration of the whole product, from the taking the hotel rooms all the way to having their own airline and distribution system. But so we allowed 100% foreign direct investment, and that also we didn't have tax at that time. So companies were very easy. They were very happy they could get a total investment return within 5 to 7 years. So that made everybody wanting to come here and developing a hotel. And while developing the hotel, they focused on new things. The Maldives was hot, but they want to be the hot property in the Maldives. So they came up with new things, and the new brands that came to the Maldives made Maldives stronger. International known brands. From India, we had Taj, of course, that came here. From Italy, we had Rio. From different parts, different brands came, international chains came. And with regard to diverse, we knew we had to, traditionally it is diving market from Italy. Then we started having honeymooners. And first, all the Maldives island resorts, they had island resort as the name. Then, in the early 2000s, the spa concept started kicking off, and all the islands took the surname Resort and Spa. So Maldives became a wellness destination. Then we knew that there are other niche areas. So while we had Maldives Sunny Side of Life, we created 4 sub-brands. The Maldives Romantic Side of Life for the honeymooning sector, Maldives Thrilling Side of Life for adventure tourism, and Maldives Colorful Side of Life for the diving market, underwater market, and the spiritual side of life for the wellness tourism. So these were our brands we had, and we wanted to make sure that Maldives is really affordable for everybody. But unfortunately, because when you develop an upmarket resort, you get returned so quickly, that's not happening. Eventually, what has happened is that's why these private jets happen to be. So we have got a lot of rooms for private jets, a lot of rooms for first class seats, a lot of rooms for business class seats, but not enough rooms for economy class seats. That's why presently our new tourism diversification plan is taking tourism to the islands. We have already started small hotels in the inhabited islands. About 20% of the beds are mid-market. In January, we are expanding it to homestay. So that will make Maldives very affordable to even college students. And also it will give a room for the new tourists to be engaged, because the new tourists want the destination story. And catching on the mice market also, we have redefined our mice product as opposed to the traditional concept of going to a meeting room. Doing a meeting under a hut or a cabana is perfectly fine. Having your shoes off and having your feet on the white sands and having the meeting is going to be more productive. So this is the new dimension we are taking. One thing we are very careful though is, especially after the pandemic, the main reason why we were able to revive so quickly is because of the geographical nature and because of the one island, one resort concept that Maldives is very famous and popular for. So we are ensuring that one island, one resort concept stays intact, but we have got new models of resorts now. Integrated tourism projects are coming. We want to make sure that Maldives has got something for everyone, because every drop counts. And our focus is on what the traveler wants. What does he want? Does he want this and that? Only a market that we are not going is the casino market. Everything else, we want Maldives to be a brand that can be associated with all the other market segments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Last but not the least, Pervin, moving on to you. Many of us know that your journey has been very different from the experiences that we have heard so far. When you took over CRY almost overnight, it was not the brand that we know today, right? The not-for-profit sector was not as structured as it is today. So what were some of the founding principles of CRY which helped you believe in the brand and then define the brand eventually?
Thank you, Ekta, and thank you, Ramesh. And like everybody else, to just wish EQUITOR all the very best for the next gazillion years that you're going to be here doing brand valuation. Yeah, so I think, CRY started in 1979, right? And we forget now, in the context of the development sector and how it is structured today, we forget that in 1979, India was pretty much the Africa of the world, where funding was pouring into India. And nobody was really raising resources in India. And into that universe came Ripon Kapoor, who was just 25 years old, and he was an airline purser actually with Air India. So it's interesting that these names have been coming up today. And he started what was not the Ripon Kapoor Foundation and what was CRY, in a sense, Child Relief, now Child Rights Anew. And I think at the heart of it really for CRY, and the reason I do believe that CRY is what it is today, is because he did that. He set up the organization CRY, and everything that we are is pretty much embodied in the name. Child, now rights, and you. And CRY, the organization, is really the and he set it up in a sense as a space, as a platform, as an institution. And remember, when he set it up with 50 rupees, right? But he had a vision. He had a large vision, much bigger than anyone could have imagined. And it was really, CRY was set up as an invitation, as an invitation to people to come in and offer of themselves the best that they had, their gifts, their talents, their resources, in a way that could be brought together and harnessed really to ensure the transformation of the lives of children. And I think because he started it as an organization that was child rights, a child relief anew, and because he set the mission at the heart of everything that we did, that pretty much drove everything that we did subsequently. So much of who Ripon was got woven into the very organization itself, into the DNA of the organization. So whether it was the belief that nothing is impossible, that every obstacle that comes our way is just an opportunity to do something different, whether it was the belief that Indian children are an Indian responsibility, whether it was the belief that India was rich in resources, we just had to figure out how to harness those resources and transform those resources for children's rights. All of that was very much woven into the DNA of the organization. I came in 1990 at a time when, again, actually, so much of what Ripon did was just so radical and bold, because in 1990, 89, he started to look at moving CRY from being a volunteer-led organization, and basically people who had come in and volunteered their time, to actually building an institution, building an organization. And in fact, again, the connections are so interesting, because one of our first professional appointees actually was the executive assistant to Mr. Ratan Tata, Indira Rajadaksh. And she came in actually, and she was the one who took Ripon's this vision that he had of building an organization, and she translated it actually into almost like brick and mortar and systems and processes and ways in which to bring in professionals. You remember in 1989, there was like a firewall, almost like the Great Wall of China, between the development sector and the corporate sector. And CRY in many ways was pioneered that coming together and bringing people from these different sectors, into the organization. And people who came in, really, I mean, they were earning probably 3,000 rupees a month, and let me say that these were not just people who could afford to be in CRY. Very often the people who were there were people who were supporting their entire families on those salaries. So it was something about being moved very deeply by a mission that was larger than yourself, that brought us all together in that organization. I always call it was like a little microcosm at that time when I joined CRY, because you had everything from people who were there, the, in inverted commas, the jholawalas outside there in the field, to people coming in from the corporate sector, to artists, to designers, to finance people, to technology, and the weaving together of that and the bringing together of that was really that mission that we had, which was to transform the lives of children, to enable them to realize their full potential, and to create the space in which people could come in and realize their potential as change makers.
Right. Thank you. I think fascinating. I think from all your points of view, it has been established that it's important to define what a brand stands for, right? Whether it's with the founders or 150 years legacy or with the country. We understand that, but it is equally important to live what we stand for on a daily basis, right? So if all of you could tell us how each one of you have managed to do that or have seen that happening in your respective organizations or entities. Minister Mausoom, if we could start from you, and if you could share some experiences of how an entire country has lived what the Maldive brand has stand for.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have the choice to be very stubborn and say, okay, we are a brand, we are here, and we should keep our brand and let people change and be following our brand. I think that could be perhaps wrong, and perhaps need a rethink on it. We need to change the attributes of the brand totally to match the needs, the expectations, the feeling of your guests, your customers. The world, as discussed in previous panels, environment is something that is really we have to look into, especially for tourism. That's our resource base. Even now, it has got a quality tag on it. It has got a global ethics responsible tag on it. Same goes with human resource. So these are, I think, new age business practices, corporate responsibilities that organizations have to practice. Also, let the customers know that they are doing it. This is going to eat up on profit a bit, but I think in the long run, it will be important. At the tourism ministry, we have some regulations, very good sound regulations for environment management and human resource. But I always tell the tourism industry is, as far as environment is concerned, it's a self-regulatory industry. And for human resource also, because you need the top of the notch smiling workforce to get happiness to the guests. For Maldives, one thing that we are very much focusing on repeat business. That is one reason why we are able to revive when there is a shock. Just like any other business, you want them to come back. And that's why Maldives, we launched our first loyalty program, destination loyalty program, Maldives Border Miles. is the first one that is there. And we go to the extent of, like recognizing individual guests who come to Maldives who have no affiliation with government, but when an organization tell us that they have a guest who has been in the Maldives for 30, 40 years, we go and greet them and make them feel good. And that message goes out loud. Regulations will be there, global regulations. Recently, we have introduced minimum wage. Then there is the service charge component. Those are small things, but I think the ethical dimension is taking a very strong hold. And for us, changing the brand, many people, we go to some resort and say, we want to keep the resort as it is, the old Maldives, without any change. But that is very good for some, but others want new change. And today, ministry, we brand ministry as the facilitation ministry, and we say the developers' creativity is the limit, except for environmental limitations and safety and security limitations. So we want Maldives to be made stronger by the investors, and they have research teams, they have people who will be able to study and find what are the small niche markets out there. So I think the key is being able to change. We need to change. Otherwise, the brand will be, I think, out of fashion. And another thing I think we have to consider is we are living in a global competition. As a destination, perhaps people will not be able to buy up Maldives. But I know that there are products that are trying to copy Maldives. You can have the physical product, but you can't copy the service. With companies, I think what's happening is when there is a threat, they always buy it up. There are mergers. And I think that's where some brands that have the potential to be very strong gets eaten up by a brand. And the big brands we see today are small ones that has grown up, and they are so big, they don't want to give chance for another small brand to become very big and tarnish the brand image of the big one. So they just take the other one and bring it into their family and let it sleep for a while the main brand continues to grow. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Mr. Bhat, coming to you. I mean, Tata is a huge organization, right? And like Mr. Bhaskar Bhat mentioned, institution inside the organization. So how has this huge organization lived up to what the Tata brand has stood for in all these years? How do you make sure it happens on a daily basis?
So very relevant question, Ekta. So the Tata Group has more than 7 lakh employees across the world.
Right.
And, you have to ensure that the values of the brand permeate down to each of us who are part of the Tata Group. It's not, so therefore you need to put in place some institutional frameworks which make that happen. And let me describe 2 or 3 of those institutional frameworks. One is, I spoke about community being center stage to the brand, and I actually quoted what our founder said about it more than 130 years back. But every Tata Group company which has started since then, if you look at the work, let me just quote examples. If you look at the work that Tata Steel has done in Jamshedpur and more recently in Kalinganagar, or you look at what Bhaskar said, the work that Titan has done in Hosur in offering employment to a large number of people from the villages in Tamil Nadu. Or look at the work that Tata Motors has done in the Pimpri Chinchwad area of Pune. Actually, at the time they created the Pune plant, they also created an artificial lake for birds and for trees to ensure that greenery and cover is maintained. Or the work that Tata Chemicals does in Gujarat for tribal welfare, which has led to Rabdi tribal women developing a brand like Okai using the local handicrafts of Gujarat, or which has led to Tata Chemicals mounting a campaign to save the whale shark or to provide water to an arid region. So, every Tata Group company, therefore, I believe, sooner or later, understands the ethos of the brand and makes sure that while they try to build a very profitable, very successful business, they also give back what they can to the community. And of course, this is enshrined at the level of the Tata Group because 66% of the equity of our parent company, Tata Sons, is held by the Tata Charitable Trust. So 66% of the dividends go to the trust. Now, let me come to the second pillar of the brand. I spoke about community being center stage. Let's take building a business which is excellent and which does business on fair and ethical values. I spoke about business excellence being a core principle of the group. Every single company which uses the Tata brand, the companies are licensed to use the Tata brand, and every single company which uses the Tata brand has to sign up to 2 documents which become living documents for the company all the time. The first document that a company has to sign up, and all of us as employees of the company have to sign up, is a Tata Code of Conduct. It's a very well documented code. It's been in place for several years now, but recently it was refreshed, benchmarking some of the best codes in the world. And that code lays down the principles of behavior that each of us has to follow in our day-to-day life. And over my years in the Tata Group, I have seen that employees, for any reason, we are finally a human organization. And if there are any employees who violate the code, I think the Tata Group is very tough on us if we do it. I think they will not brook that violation. So that is one living document which each person signs up to. There are training programs around the Tata Code of Conduct, and it's drilled into all of us that the Code of Conduct is essential to our day-to-day behavior. The second document that we ensure, and that's what, I'm not saying that a code can cover every single person holistically. There will still be human beings and there will still be aberrations, and the code should be, we have a very good ethics organization within the Tata Group to address those aberrations, including a chief ethics officer for the Tata Group, chief ethics officers for each company, and so forth. So we have to be, not only have a code, but also have an ethics organization to address or to safeguard the code and institutionalize it and implement it. The second living document, EQUITOR, goes back to business excellence and creating products and services which are of excellent value and quality for our consumers. And we have a document we have a system called the Tata Business Excellence Model, where every company, no matter how large or how small it is,
right,
no matter how old or how new it is assessed under the Tata Business Excellence Model every year.
right.
It's assessed on the quality of its leadership, the quality of its strategy, the quality of its consumer connect, the quality of its HR and people management, the quality of its information technology and data, on the results that it produces. What this does, EQUITOR, is that each of us have to submit our respective companies to this assessment. And the assessment holds a mirror to us. It shows us what we are doing right on business excellence and what we can improve on. So that constant mirror that the Tata Business Excellence Model holds to each company of the group is yet another day-to-day method of ensuring that the value of the brand gets institutionalized.
Right.
Of course, we expect that over a period of time, those of us who work with the Tata Group for many years will imbibe this code, will imbibe those shall I say, principles of business excellence in everything that we do. But that happens with experience, and that happens also, with some passage of time. But these are the institutional day-to-day documents that form the basis. And unless a company implements the Tata Code of Conduct and is part of the Tata Business Excellence Model, they do not have a license to use the Tata brand. So those are some day-to-day principles that the Tata Group has put in place.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhat. Pervin, now moving on to you. So we know that you have understood the brand intuitively. That's what you spoke about, right? How have you ensured that when you were working in the organization, people internally got aligned to what CRI stood for? That intuition became more articulated.
Yeah, so I think that, like in so many ways, it's a bit like the British Constitution. For the longest time, it was not written down, because as long as Ripon was there, he lived it. And we looked to him for that kind of guidance, But we lost Ripon in 94, and the organization was just 15 years old at that point in time. We're now more than 40. And I think what became vital at that time for us was to ensure that that which resided in Ripon and which he carried, we really took that out, and it became something that was held and shared across the organization, within each person. Each person was actually living it. I still remember, uh, we had a memorial service after Ripon passed away, and I remember standing there, and I was doing the emceeing, and I remember feeling, oh my God, like the person, the soul of the organization is gone, and how are we going to actually move forward? And 1 year later, we did a memorial service. Just one. It was the only year we did a memorial service after he passed away. And I was again emceeing, and I remember just looking out at the organization, and there were, all our Bombay. It was that time it was in Bombay, and the employees were there. And I remember looking at everybody, and there was this energy, there was this passion, there was this commitment, and I realized, it hadn't gone anywhere. It was right there, alive, and today every single person was carrying that. And I think that was also because we laid emphasis. In fact, Pooja is here, who's now our CEO, and in that time she was in HR. She was our first. I mean, Pooja was the first HR person, I think, in the development sector in this country, because she came in at that time when no development organization had HR. But we recognize that people that are really the heart. For us, there's no other resource really. We don't have manufacturing, nothing. We just have people who carry the vision, and so it was we poured a lot of time and energy into what we called institution building, which was really about how do you carry the mission, how is there alignment around the mission, how is there alignment around the values, how are we living those values, not just in our HR and how we interact with each other, but how are the values of the organization translating into our very strategy, into the organizational strategy, into what we're doing at the grassroots level, into how we're building and what are the kind of relationships we're building with our partners, who are the ones who are actually reaching children. So we invested a lot in what we called institution building. And a lot of that was also doing deep internal work, inside out work, because we realized that transformation outside is only possible if you're willing to go through that transformation inside. So it is an inside out process. It is also understanding what it takes to change, what it takes to it's very easy to go out into the field, to communities and say, you need to change, but we need to understand what it takes to actually change. So I think a lot of we invested a lot of time in that, in aligning, because people came from diverse backgrounds into CRY, and so it was important to find what was it that would hold us all together. And we realized it was those mission and values that really held us all together, that gave us that was the ground of our being, as it were, and that allowed us to, from there, be creative, from there be innovative, from there be bold, be courageous, and step out and do things that perhaps maybe we didn't think were possible. But really, to be able to step out with that courage, you had to be anchored in the values. I remember many years after Ripon passed away, in fact, I went for a meeting we went to ICICI, and we were going to them for a big grant at that point, and we were meeting, I think it was Mr. Nachiket Moore. I think even Pooja was there at that meeting. And we were talking about what CRY had gone through, and talking about the fact that Ripon was not there anymore. And the interesting thing is, I think if I were to poll most people in this on this conversation, most people might know CRY, but a lot of people will not know Ripon. And in many ways, looking back, I recognize what an extraordinary gift that was to us as an organization. That he didn't take that credit for himself. He didn't put any spotlight on himself. He just shone the spotlight on the mission, on the organization, on the work, on children. And when Mr. Moore looked at our annual report, and he said, I'm absolutely astonished, because I'm looking at 1994, when you lost your founder, when most, especially NGOs, are so centered around their founder. And he said, all I can see is, your trajectory is just going up. There's not even a blip there. So whatever happened to you happened internally. You all had to deal with the blow of losing your founder, but externally you continue to do the work. And I believe that's because of how CRY got structured around its mission, and that everybody, no matter what had happened to us, The one thing we knew we had to continue, the one direction we had, it was so clear for us, that we had to continue to do what we had to do, because there was this huge, and there continues to be this huge need as far as children are concerned, and I think that, like, when I look back, we celebrated 40 years a couple of years ago, and it was so beautiful because we did the history of CRY. And what was amazing for people like myself, who I call, I'm like now a dinosaur in CRY, literally. But you see the young people, some of them who were just there in that gathering, had been just in CRY for 3 months and 4 months, and yet there's this intangible spirit that has continued over those 40 years, that it's still you get it. It's the CRY spirit. I can't explain it with more clarity, more words, but there's a CRY spirit that still continues. You walk into a CRY office and it's completely different. We're doing completely different things from even when I was in CRY full time. We're a different organization. Pooja and Vatsala, who are here, will tell you what we're doing. And yet there's something that you can recognize from its essence, which was there from the beginning, and I think that is that intangible essence of who we are, and the values that are just lived and breathed and are transmitted, in that interaction, in that interface that happens on a regular basis. Yes, now we have things written down, and I think it's vital. I just heard Mr. Bhat also talking about having those documents. I think it's vital to have certain things written down, available for everybody, and also not just written down, but experienced and lived, so that we know what those values, what does it mean when we say justice, equality, dignity, and integrity? What does that mean for us? So it's really important. But I think all of that only means something when it's lived and breathed. Yeah.
All right. I think just as a follow-up, you mentioned about people who are already in the system, how they have understood it and are now, exemplifying it in many ways, right? What about people who are not in the system? We have heard that it's very difficult to attract talent for the social sector sometimes. So how do you manage to do that by standing for what CRY has been defined over the years?
Yeah, I think it is. It's different. I think today is different because today the development sector is it's a much broader setup. There are organizations today that are paying very well, that are doing, they're philanthropic organizations now, they're foundations, etc. But organizations like CRY, it's still hard because, at the end of the day, at a very core level, we don't pay the kind of salaries, even within the development sector, that are there. But I think what has consistently over the years drawn people to CRY is, I always say this, we call we're a public trust, right? And I think I understood that to mean that we hold public resources in trust for children. And I think an article of faith for us from day one has been that in what we do, we have to ensure accountability, transparency. I mean, we would put out an annual report. Nobody even asked us to put out an annual report. We would put out our salaries. We would put out exactly how much money we have raised, exactly where that money is going, because we believe that we're holding resources in trust for children. We have to honor, first of all, our children. And I think, therefore, the work that we do and the fact that that work makes a difference. Two things people want to know. One is, can I make a difference actually in this large problem? And the second is, can I trust you? And if people know that, then I think that makes a difference. And the second thing, I think CRY has attracted people who came in, I think, especially from the corporate sector, a lot of people who came in from the corporate sector. I remember Ingrid, who's again another person from the advertising world, came in. When she came into CRY, I remember her saying to me, she said, I thought I was coming, 13 years in advertising. I know it all. I've been there, done it, worked with every possible kind of brand. So I was going to come and, tell CRY how to do its brand work. And she said, I come here and I realized everything that I know doesn't work. I have to completely unlearn what I've learned and relearn. And so what I realized was that when we talked about realizing full potential, I think what CRY offered and continues to offer people is an opportunity to come in and make a difference, make a tangible impact in the lives of children, especially from a CRY point of view, but also you come in and you learn, you come in and you grow as a professional, you come in and you grow as a human being, you come in and you grow in community, you know, I think it allows you to realize your full potential. And I think that is finally what actually draws people and keeps people here, even though, you know, we really don't pay sustainable salaries at all.
Right. Minister Mausoom, how would you develop a workforce which would, which can be built around what the Maldives brand stands for? Like, does it happen through the education system or training in the workforce? So what happens and how would you build a workforce which would display what the Maldives brand stands for?
For a destination brand, I think it is rather easy because Maldives for Maldives to be what Maldives is, we have got God-given nature's endowment, beautiful islands, marine flora and fauna, and the beautiful Maldives people with very warm hospitality. So that those are given, but we have to let tourists see them. And comes then various service dimensions and product dimensions that individual brands come, and when they see there is a niche market, they come here. We have for example, seaplane, which has become part of the experience of the Maldives. That has enabled the Maldives seaplane fleet to be the biggest in the world. Then small niche things like skydiving, these type of things are becoming popular as people come in. So I think the strength of the Maldives lie in the diversity, and the people of the country are very important, and all our success attributes. For example, last 2 years, the biggest message we have to give is that of safety and security in terms of COVID. And how is it portrayed to the guests? Through our messaging, that's one thing. But I think the strongest message is through guests. So I think today, many brands, they like to involve guests in the total experience and let them talk of the brand values, what the brand stands for, so that it's more credible. When we say something that you can take off the mask in a resort island, it may be difficult to believe, but when you see Bollywood stars flooding the Instagram with their Maldives experience, that's very credible. And I think that's where we gave very huge attention to the first impression at the airport. When people arrive, we have that safety image, and we managed to get the global safety certificates. We gave I'm vaccinate badges to the staff community. So at given times, you have to strengthen on particular aspects of the brand. And I think it's very important that everybody sings the same song. Otherwise, it will be confusing. And for us, increasing the quality of service is very, very important. So we are into continuous training. As the safety aspect, we have very strict safety regulation. That's why I mentioned in terms of regulation, we have, when we give the room to creativity, environment and safety and security are two components we look a bit closer into. The beauty of having international sub-brands to push Maldives is very good, because the international brands, they have their brand values that is followed through as a panelist. Couldn't see the name there. Yeah, Harish Bhat mentioned the whole organization. Everybody has to have the value of it, totally believe and portray it. So these international brands do that, and because of the success of international brands, the local brands are also following on it. Training, because we have to make sure that we give perfect service, and we believe that Maldives have to compete with the other destinations. Even though we are world's leading consecutively for 2 years, we know that we have to compete every day. So we are working towards that, and ensure that everybody gives what Maldives is portrayed as a destination that people can come and have a nice holiday in whatever dimension they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pervin. Thank you, Minister. And my last question to you, Mr. Bhat. We all know that people aspire to work with the Tatas. But the current workforce, whether it's the millennials who are in their mid-age currently, or the Gen Z who are starting to work, based on who we are, how are we trying to stay relevant to that group of the workforce?
So very relevant question, Ekta, and here's my perspective on that. First and foremost, I think millennials and Gen Z seek a work culture, a work environment, which may be very different from my generation. And it's important to create that work culture and work environment in every organization, no doubt about it. But I'm going back to the idea of the brand. The idea of the brand cannot change. And it is true that alongside interesting work, alongside a very different work environment from what earlier generations were used to, one of the things that millennials and Gen Z, are seeking is really brands with a purpose. They want to join organizations which they think are doing some good. I can see this when I speak to my daughter. I can see this when I speak to children of my colleagues who are in their 20s. And I can see that they clearly say there are some brands and some organizations they would love to work for because they believe in the purpose of that brand.
Right.
This is not just about the Tata Group, it's about many other brands which have a sense of purpose as well. So because we have such an inherent and strong sense of purpose, my belief is that many people from Gen Z and many people from the millennial generation are joining the Tata Group and enjoying working with us because they know that when they work for the Tata Group, they're also contributing back to the community, contributing back to the society. So that's the other central organizing principle of the brand, which I think is bringing millennials and Gen Z in. But having said that, I think it's important to create the right environment for the much younger generation, ensure that we are on the ball with what they require from their work, what they require from their workplaces. And we need to understand those needs and not expect that they will have the same needs as the generations which have gone by. The Tata Group has been very successful in attracting millennials and Gen Z people into many of our group companies because of these organizing principles.
Right. Brilliant. I think we are at the end of our panel. Thank you so much to all the three of you. I think the discussions went to a completely different level. Over to you, Tarun, for the question from the Q&A.
Hi, panel members. That was an absolutely enticing conversation. What I would like to ask is a question put forward, which is how does a brand like Tata institutionalize value, especially at the ground level among people? I think Mr. Bhat touched upon this slightly, and how does it transcend even beyond the TCOC?
Yeah. So I touched upon that briefly. Very good question. Thank you for this question. I touched upon it briefly in one of my earlier answers. I think the Tata Code of Conduct as well as the Tata Business Excellence Model, which I described, bring the core principles of the brand into the day-to-day lives of all of us within the organization. In addition, while I've also already described that, in addition, what we also do is we ensure that the principles of our founder, Jamshedji Tata, the principles of other iconic leaders in the group like J.R.D. Tata are kept alive. So every year you will see a celebration on Founders Day on the 3rd of March, where we talk about why Jamshedji Tata, the why of the organization, why did he set us up, and what should we do to live up to his values. And that happens across the Tata Group. Every year on 29th of July, which is J.R.D. Tata's birthday, you will see a J.R.D. Tata Quality Excellence Night, which and Excellence Awards event, which people across the group participate in. So apart from the Tata Code of Conduct and the Tata Business Excellence model, I think it's very important to keep the stories of your iconic leaders. For instance, Pervin mentioned Ripon and his dreams in setting up CRY. That's a very inspiring story for everyone who works in CRY, of why he set up. So the why of the organization has to, like many people have said, the why is much more important than the how. All of us will learn to do the how, but getting the why into all our minds is important. And that often comes by keeping the founders' ideals alive. It often comes by talking of iconic leaders of the group and how they have actually exemplified, how they have lived those values in their life. And it also comes through, talking about many employees who have typified and exemplified those values and making heroes out of them, so that each of us know that that is the kind of behavior which is celebrated in our group. So there are many other things that we do, but that is, I think, a short answer to a very interesting question.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Bhat.
And if I may also add, as an answer to that question, it's not a question of explaining concepts or philosophies. I think these are best told through real stories. What has really happened? Stories hold our imagination. Real life stories of what our leaders have done, of what our colleagues have done. That is what I think captures the imagination and ensures that values become tangible in front of your eyes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I believe we are at the end of time. So my apologies to the audience members for not having been able to take up more questions. I would now like to thank our panel members for having shared the time that they have shared with us. What becomes very evident from this captivating conversation and through the variety of experience that our panel members have brought is that the brand, or rather the founding principles, are not just something that are applicable just in the corporate world. They transcend into the development sector, attracting talent across industries, and apply to nations as well, and apply to such an extent that another equivalent cannot simply replicate, even if they try to. And like Mr. Bhat rightfully put, the founding factors resonate across generations, not just across industries. And when we look at other components of the business, or of all the stories that we have heard today, any other component of a business is incapable of having the the impact that is as large and far-reaching as the impacts of these driving values of that of a brand. It has been an absolute privilege to have, for all of us at EQUITOR, to have all of you panel members and our audience members as well. I would like to thank each and everybody for their unique perspectives and for making an evening absolutely captivating.